Good morning, Highlands, Presbyterian. So today, Reformation Sunday, we're kicking off our stewardship season. And we're thinking about how we're blessed to be a blessing to others, really looking through the lens of Abraham. And so that'll be today, next Sunday, and then also the 19th of November, which will be our stewardship commitment Sunday, right before we roll into Christ the King Sunday, and then the first Sunday of Advent, the beginning of the new church year. It's amazing how quickly that all comes up on us. But today, we're looking through Genesis 18, where Abraham hosts his angelic visitors, and thinking about foundations. And modern construction projects are fascinating to me. And I look back at the Empire State Building in 1930. It took 13 and a half months to build. It seems like we don't build anything that quickly anymore. Every once in a while I'll hear about some escalator in a subway that's taking 2 years just to repair it. I've been driving by that gas station there at the intersection of Hard Road and Kenny, and there's a rather impressive hole that they've dug, and I've seen the picture of what they're going to build, and it looks fine. But at this point, you can't help but wonder, are they going to do more than dig a hole? And I think one reason buildings take so long is work that doesn't appear like it's doing much, but is vitally important, is foundation work, to make sure that it's a strong foundation that can be built upon. I once financed the construction of an assisted living facility, and it turns out they had to inject concrete into the soil because the soil wasn't stable enough, and so it needed concrete throughout the soil so that it would be stable enough so that they could build upon it. And so we talk about this time of year, especially you think about skeletons in the closet. Sometimes they're literally skeletons in the dirt. The North Market Tower that they're going to build there in the parking lot has been hung up because that's the site of the Old North graveyard. And at one point, I guess they had 32 archaeologists working full-time, going through all of the human remains that were there and making sure that they're doing things properly according to what needs to be done. And it's important work. It's costly, it's timely, but it's important work. So if you don't do it at the beginning, you can't go back and repair it. Once the building is built, but the building will be unstable. And so you have to spend the time doing the foundation work. And it's not true only in buildings. So many other things in life. If you want to go run a marathon, you don't just show up without bothering to train for it. You have to build a foundation of fitness, or you're going to have a terrible experience. If you try to cook a gourmet meal without first learning basic cooking skills, the end result is unlikely to taste very good. I once saw a clip the other day of a college student lamenting that the entry-level jobs that they were applying for paid $50,000 a year and didn't count her collegiate experience, and she wanted a job paying $200,000 a year as soon as she got out of college. And I respect her ambition, and there's certainly plenty of sort of entry-level jobs that seem to require 5 years of experience. But so many careers, they're based upon you build a foundation of job skills while getting paid less, and you move up as you develop skills. I'm very grateful the first sermons I preached are not recorded for posterity's sake. I'm sure they weren't great. I think nepotism is probably the only way to really skip those foundational steps, and unfortunately I didn't get to benefit from that. I have to build a career the old-fashioned way. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about stewardship. And as I said, on November 19th, we're going to have time to bring forth our pledges for 2024, because it's not that far away. It's an incredible blessing that in this church, we are able to be financially self-sustaining, and that's because of your great generosity, because you give financially out of what you have received. And that's what stewardship is about. Stewardship, it's about far more than just money. It's the art of taking care of what has been given to you. A steward is employed by a household to manage household affairs, or it's an employee on a ship who manages the provisions of food throughout the journey. So when we talk about stewardship, we have to do it, we base it on the resources that we have. And as Christians, we look through the lens of recognizing the tremendous gifts, the blessings that have been given to us by God. And it's foundational work to have a proper understanding, have an appreciation of truly all of our blessings, all of our gifts that we've received. And only then do we then start to think about how we can share those. Stewardship, it's not a matter of what the church can take. It's about all of us recognizing what we've been given and thinking about how we give back out of that. So we tend to think about how it's ours, our money, our time, our gifts. But stewardship is a reminder to use our God-given gifts wisely, to think about the needs of others, the needs of the community around us, while keeping things in an eternal perspective, remembering what the root of all of this is. Because it's so easy to forget the eternal. We get so focused on today, all the things we just have to do to get through today, and we forget we've been created with eternity in mind. As baptized members of the Church of Jesus Christ, we always stand with one foot firmly rooted in eternity and one foot in earth. We live in both kingdoms, but our true citizenship is in Christ's church. And the treasures that come along with that are the likes of which the world cannot comprehend. I think we can't really truly wrap our minds around the treasures that come with being part of Christ's church. We are so rich. But we forget that, because rather than measure ourselves in the eyes of God, we measure ourselves in the eyes of the world, and we say, hey, we're poor because every time we look at the news, we see that Bill Gates owns 4 private planes, while we debate spending an extra $50 to get more leg room in an exit row. And so to help us think about stewardship, we're going to focus on parts of the story of Abraham. Fascinating story. We're gonna drill down into it. Abraham has a story. It's not always a smooth journey. It's one of those, we look at Abraham as one of the heroes of the faith, and we think, oh, it must have been easy to have faith like Abraham when God appeared so real like that. But Abraham's story is hard. It's lots of challenging chapters in there. I mean, just think of the beginning in Genesis 12. God appears to Abraham and just tells Abraham to go away from his community, to go away from what he knows and venture into something new. It doesn't sound like a blessing, but it leads Abraham into deeper waters in his relationship with God. And then in Genesis 15, there's this incredible moment, this covenant that God makes, and it's promises that God makes to Abraham about blessings that will come to Abraham and those who follow after him. And so what happens are these animals are cut in two, and typically the weaker party would walk between these animals that have been cut in two, as sort of symbolically saying, if I break the covenant, this is what will happen to me. But instead, in this covenant, God walks between the animals, and God takes on the burden of keeping the covenant as a gift, as a blessing to Abraham. So Abraham is rooted in this covenant that God has made. And so it's so important when we think about foundational work of recognizing the blessings that we've received from God, is that we are heirs to this covenant that God is making with us. And we see the vulnerability that God is willing to take on to keep up God's end of the covenant. So think about the promises that Jesus Christ makes to us, about the promises of watching over us, the promises of shepherding us through life and through death into life eternal, the promises of pursuing us when we're lost, and that it's God who takes on the burden of keeping all of this. And that's treasure. That's blessing. And so how do we root ourselves in that and always remember that when we think about our gifts, when we think about what we have, how's that rise to the top of the list? And so to think about the world through that lens of what a blessing that is. And Abraham is then charged at this moment to then think about how Abraham can be a blessing to others. So Abraham isn't supposed to close his fists tight around any blessings, but rather he keeps his hands open so that the blessings flow through his hands and into the lives of others. From the very beginning of faith, blessings are meant to be passed on. The security, the grace, and the joy and the peace that we get from God is all meant to be passed on. It's foundational that as Christians, we understand that it's about us, but it's not just about us. It's about us forming a community, and each and every one of us passing on that joy and that peace one to another. And then when that, that our earthly treasure follows our eternal treasure, our heart follows that. And so if we can root ourselves in thinking about how we share that, then it's only natural that we think about how we share material blessings. And so this is what we see in our today's story and our reading from Genesis 18. Abraham, he's sitting by his tent. 3 visitors come his way. They're appearing in the heat of the day. And hospitality is the expectation. If you have resources, you offer them to guests. And so Abraham begs the men to stay as his guests, have their feet cleaned. They lounge in the shade, and Abraham goes to have a feast prepared. Abraham is in a position, he has much. These travelers are in need. And so Abraham has taken to heart God's charge that he is blessed to be a blessing. And these men are viewed as an opportunity to bless others. So they're invited to linger, to rest, to eat. They're blessed by Abraham's hospitality. And what comes next is they then deliver to Sarah the news that she's going to have a child. So they have been blessed by Abraham's hospitality. They then offer a blessing to Sarah. That's a cycle that continues, this virtuous cycle. And it's. I was reading the other day a book, and it talked about how this is, in many ways, this is hardwired into the human race, and it's unique to humans. That no man is an island. We are enriched by others. I was thinking of Social Security, and it's the backbone of that. The contributions you pay into Social Security while you work support the retirements of those who paid in while they worked, of those who are older than you. And when you retire, you are then supported by those who are still working. And then one day when they retire, they'll live off the Social Security taxes of others. It's not true in other species. A chimpanzee, when it's 13 years old, it will have produced 40% of the calories it will produce throughout its life. And it will have consumed the same percentage. But humans are unique. When a human is 13, it will have consumed about 20% of the calories it will consume over its lifespan. But it will only have produced around 4%. It's able to reach age 13 because it benefits from the work of others. And that work in its future will serve other youths as they grow. It's hardwired into who we are as a species, as people. And so we are in the church. We'll focus on this in weeks to come. When Scripture asks of us today is to think about how we are blessed. What are the treasures? What are the gifts that we have? In the year to come, there are 52 weeks. And I invite you over the weeks to come as we lead up into Stewardship Sunday, sit down and think about these 52 weeks. Each holds an opportunity to bless someone else. But the key to doing this is to think about the ways you have been blessed. What do you have that you could extend to someone else? What might the opportunities to be over the next years? You think about the seasons and the holidays and the occasions and the events and all of the things that are to come. Do you ever sit down and write out a list and think about it through the lens of how can I share with the community, with the neighborhood around me? Maybe you have a backyard where you can host people in the evenings. Maybe you have a great soup recipe that you can share with somebody who's homebound. Sit down and have a meal with somebody who's lonely. Maybe there's a charity event you're passionate about. You can invite others to partake in. Maybe there's a holiday where you can host a party for the church. Maybe there's a mission trip or an event you'd love to lead or participate in. You have been blessed. Sometimes it's easier than others to recognize the ways. And so make some time to think about the resources you have and the occasions that are to come in the next 52 weeks. How can you open your hands and let events and let blessings slide through your hands and into the lives of others? As we look to November 19th, we'll all be invited to pledge our resources toward enriching and blessing others. Like Abraham, we're all in a tent, and others will enter our lives. We can turn them away, but in doing so, we may miss the chance to bless them and see how they might bless others. If we have open minds, if we have open hearts, the Spirit draws us into opportunities where we can see a path to share the things Christ has given us. You have been baptized into the church eternal. You have been marked as Christ's own forever. This is a gift given freely. And the joy and the peace of Christ dwells in you. How can we share that news with the world? A light in the dark world, sharing blessings so that others too may lift their eyes to the heavens. Then give thanks.